Hey YouTube, Grunt Reviews. I have got a fun one for you. I love all things 5.7 here at the channel. Been one of my favorite calibers for a while, and of course if you've seen some of my other videos, I do have a kind of a nostalgic fascination with the AR57 or the AR57. Choose your favorite nomenclature there. But guys, today I'm going to compare the Gen 1 to the Gen 2 and the Gen 3, as you'll see just ahead, the differences between all of the different uppers, the lowers, the bolt carrier groups. I am trying to essentially provide an information dump, if you will, of all the knowledge that I have acquired on these things, since the info is so rare and hard to get a hold of, and a lot of it's rumors and whispers. So this is kind of all of the hard data that I've managed to collect into one place. I wanted to put it into a video repository for use by anybody who may have interest in these things. Do want to give a special shout out to Prepper's Gun and Coin. They are a local 5.7 shop in Oklahoma. Well, they are a full-service shop, but they also have a fascination and a specialty with 5.7. They did loan me this Gen 1 upper for this video, so special thanks to those guys for making this possible. And guys, as always, go down below, like, subscribe, share us with your friends, drop a comment with your thoughts or any info that you may have to add to this, kind of trying to make this a repository. And guys, let's get into it. All right, so without further ado, we are going to jump right into this. So in front of you, I have all three generations of the AR57 or AR57, as some of them call it, here on the table. So we have a Gen 1, we have a Gen 2, and we have a Gen 3. Wanted to show you kind of all of them up front, side by side, to highlight some of the differences, and then we will jump into the individual sections of it. So starting from front to rear, you'll notice the Gen 1, this particular one has a bird cage on it. There was one other muzzle brake that was offered on some of these, and there was a pistol version of this that also had a little bit different muzzle brake. Because one, there's so little info, and these things are so hard to find, I don't have obviously all those muzzle brakes. But you'll notice it is a very, very full-size barrel, no sort of fluting. It's roughly like a AR-15 government profile, decent size, and it is monolithic all the way to the rear. Moving forward to the Gen 2, same size barrel, but they did add some nice fluting to it, and once again they changed the muzzle device just a bit. And then with the Gen 3, this is known as the SLC to them, or super light carbine. They went to a very small pencil profile barrel and a very small muzzle device as well on that. So the barrel is going to be one of the big ones, and then the weight of these is also going to be the factor, each generation getting lighter and lighter. As we work our way to the back, 1, 2, and 3 all do use a monolithic body. The Gen 1 is not ambidextrous. You'll notice there is no charging handle here on the left side. It is only on the right-hand side for right-handed shooters. It is significantly larger. We'll see if I can get that on camera, but the main body of this is significantly fatter than the Gen 2s and the Gen 3s there. It does have Picatinny rail, one small section at the front for mounting a front sight, and then it has both side rails and the bottom rail as well. All of these do take the same PS90 style mag. However, it does need to be mentioned that AR57, AR57 does have their own magazine. It looks almost identical to the PS90 magazine. You'll notice if you look at a real FN, it's got more of a arrowhead shape instead of a smaller arrow on it. That's one of the easy ways to tell. These things are still available on various surplus places for a decent price, but the actual FN mags do take a little bit of work to get them to run right in the AR57 uppers. Working our way back here, and I will see if this highlights. So the Gen 1 had no marking on the top of the receiver under the magazine. The Gen 2 was marked LEM. And I will say this, some of these Gen 1s were marked PDW. It was rare to see them. It was the later, I'll call them a Gen 1.5, but they did have a marking there. And then the Gen 3 right there is marked SLC. The upper serial number, Gen 1 and Gen 2, are on the right-hand side. On the Gen 3, it is on the left-hand side. I don't believe that's for any particular purpose outside of just how they decided to mill these uppers. The Gen 1 uses a straight pull magazine release. So it's ambi to an extent. It's usually easier to use both fingers, but it is a straight back pull, whereas the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 went to a tilting magazine release. So you can either, keep that right there, try to run off. So you can use either side. It does make that more ambidextrous. The Gen 1 here, charging handle, like I said, is only on the right side, and it is just a stationary single piece solid charging handle, whereas the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 here use a flip-up style charging handle, and these are ambidextrous. So you're actually able to move the charging handle from one side of the upper to the other. Working our way to the back, the rears are essentially the same. If you look somewhat closely, and it's hard to tell, the holes in the rear rail are just ever so slightly larger, maybe 1/1000th or so. Probably not as apparent on camera as it is in person, but the lightning cuts up there. And then outside of that, the writing on the Gen 1 significantly larger, where they have AR57, smaller on the Gen 2 and on the Gen 3. So as they progressed forward to Gen 2, obviously they did change the barrel there and the muzzle device as we discussed, but they also went in to try to shave some weight down. They made the upper less thick, the actual body itself. They drilled some or milled some lightning holes in the pick rail on both sides and on the bottom. And like I said, they did go to an ambidextrous charging system. So you're actually able to remove these and move the charging handle to the other side and move the plate. Something to be noted, and in the later section of this, when I talk about the AR57 lowers, with the bolt catch, this does not lock back on an empty magazine, but it does have a bolt catch. If you do decide to move the charging handle to the left-hand side, you do need to remove the bolt catch. It will interfere with the charging handle. Since it is essentially not functional, it's not going to harm anything, but it is something to consider there. Of course, as I stated above, it does have your flippy style spring-loaded charging handle, and you do get some markings underneath it. We can see the rest of the fluting inside of the upper there, where they shave the barrel down a little bit, and then we will get to the Gen 3. So the Gen 3, Gen 1 and Gen 2 both have a full-length bottom rail. The Gen 3 gives you kind of a hybrid, so you get almost, on the bottom side, you get what is it? I guess technically 3 sections of pick there, or 3 slots. And you do get M-lock on the bottom. Of course, you get M-lock down the sides as well. And then where I have this backup iron sight, you do get some pick on the top for a front sight. With that, and obviously with that pencil profile barrel, this thing is very, very, very much lighter than the 2 or the 1. And I actually am going to grab my scale here in a second. Outside of the actual the chassis and the rail sections, 2 and 3 are virtually identical. The parts are somewhat interchangeable. And I say somewhat, what you start to run into with the AR57 stuff, the concept is very cool. I really like these. Keep in mind that these have been out for, about a decade, maybe a little bit over. AR57 did go out of business. I believe the current story is they got sued out of existence by FN. So there's not a whole lot of info, and that's, like I said in the intro, that's kind of why I'm doing this. But as you progress through each generation, they upgraded, but the 2 and the 3, virtually identical, except the 3 is significantly lighter and uses M-lock instead of pick rail there. But to the parts interchangeability portion of it, tolerances were not something that AR57 did well. Whether it's moving bolt groups in between the different generations, and I am going to, I will pull these out and compare them side by side for you there. But the differences between them, shall we say, not everything works with everything else. So even the screw threading for the charging handle is slightly different between 2 and 3, but only on some of them. The Gen 1 was very, very well thought out, and I actually have seen some decent quality control out of these as they progressed forward through the generations. It almost seemed like they were just putting stuff together, almost like if you've watched any of my Turkish shotgun reviews. Some of these seem to be absolutely fantastic, and others seem to be, we'll call them poorly assembled, but just lack of quality control, lack of tolerance there. So it is something to consider when you're purchasing one, especially if this is a sight unseen type thing. Let me grab my scale here, and I'm gonna highlight this. All right. And we'll go to, bear with me, I got a little glare doing this upside down. All right. So the Gen 1, with the bolt carrier in it, nothing else, we're looking at 4 pounds, 8.91 ounces. Move that out of the line of sight there. Something else to notice too, because there is no charging handle on these, and especially if you see these at like a gun show or something, there is nothing holding the bolt carrier in. So a lot of times you'll see these with a piece of tape on the rear. If you're looking at purchasing just an upper, this is something to be aware of. If you pick it up, the carrier does like to slide out of it. So the Gen 2, we drop down to 3 pounds, 15 ounces. And then the most impressive one here. So this is the Gen 3, and this is with a spark solar and some backup iron sights on it. And let's see if we can get her. We're at 3 pounds, 11, and we'll call it 3 pounds, 12 ounces, and that is with the spark solar as well as with the backup iron sights. So the Gen 3 is significantly lighter than the Gen 1 and Gen 2. Let me get the bolts out of these and I will show you the differences in the carriers. All right, so just like we started this off, we have our Gen 1, we have our Gen 2, and we have our Gen 3. So the 2 and the 3 are somewhat interchangeable. So I've had several of these now, and the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 carriers, the variance on the rails where they slide, the actual depth on these, depending on the upper itself and the carrier, there can be 30 thousandths of variance between the proper depths of these rails. And the bolts vary, the receivers vary. Like I said, the tolerances were not something in the later years that AR57 excelled at. So if you have Gen 2 or Gen 3 uppers, the bolts may or may not work with each other. These things are two-piece units, so you are actually able to remove the front half. However, same deal, each one of these is clocked individually, so the forward section of these will not move between different carriers, even in the same generation. Sides of these bad boys are going to look exactly the same, so this one I believe is completely unfired. My Gen 2's got some rounds through it, and my Gen 3 has plenty of rounds through it. But side of it, visually they all look the same. The difference is you'll notice the cut is just a little bit wider on the Gen 3, and it may be a little hard to come through in the video, and a little bit narrower on the Gen 1. It's a few thousandths, but it's enough to see. Working our way down to the bottom, we have, so some of these bolts, as you'll notice with the Gen 2 and the Gen 3, they are basically flat, and this Gen 1 almost has a bit of a lip there. The Gen 1 bolts were just a little bit taller. Same deal, just a few thousandths if you look at them side by side. Some of them were, I'm going to say, milled polished on the bottom, and some of them were nitrided. Just kind of depends on which one you got. Don't let that sway you one way or the other. And then we do get in the rear, so obviously we have our notch for our buffer retainer there. The Gen 1s had a very, very large cut on the back, and these are, you'll see that it says up on this 1 and this 2, and then the 3 says fa, and we'll discuss that in just a minute. But basically, this harkens back to the late 2000s, early teens, when ARs were still coming with a semi-auto only cut, if you will. So for anything with forced reset, obviously you do need the longer cut in the rear. But the Gen 1s were very, very generously cut in the back. Gen 2, they did bring that forward just a little bit, but same deal, because it's marked up on the back of it. This will not work with something like a forced reset, or if you are an SOT, or can possess Class 3 type items, this will not work with it. This last one is essentially the holy grail of these things. So this one does say FA, and you'll notice the cut does come all the way forward to the same location that you would have on a something like an M16 or a more modern bolt carrier. This one will work with FRT style triggers, or if you have an SOT, obviously you can do a little bit more there if you have the legal power to do so. Here is some shots of both. I'll do the rare breed first, and then we'll do the full giggle switch at the end here. So these were only sold to SOTs, and we'll see if that comes through in the light. But the Gen 3 ones were marked. The standard up carriers as well as the FA carriers were both marked or lasered AR57 there, their logo, whereas that was not done on the 1 or the 2. But these are the holy grail, if you will, of trying to find one. Every once in a while you'll see one on the absolute low end. You are looking at $500 to $600 as of today in 2021, and some of these will sell for $1,000 to $1,100. Like I said at the beginning of this, with the different uppers, you may have to do some modification. You may have to do some machine work, because the tolerances are so bad between the upper and the bolt carrier. It may take some work to actually get this to run in your upper. The pistol carrier for the PDW version of these, which was the Gen 1, and they had a few in the Gen 2, it does use the same carrier on these, something to be aware of, but they are not, they can be interchangeable, but they are not always interchangeable. So something to look at if you're doing, if you're wanting to move bolts between the various uppers. Let me grab the lowers that I have, and we will get into that. All right, so lowers. So AR57 did produce lower receivers, and they'll be marked AR57 there. It'll say obviously 5.7 by 28 cal, and then you'll see a couple different markings on these. So the Gen 1 and Gen 2 will be marked either LEM or PDW. Everything else will be the same there. The very, very original one of these, and I have yet to get my hands on the original AR57 lowers, were actually an Arrow lower with an Arrow logo, and then had AR57 stamped into them. And then they either went directly to the forge, which is most likely, I'm assuming they got them from New Frontier, and started doing their own. Something to note on these lowers, especially the Gen 1 and the Gen 2s, they are very, very finicky. I go back to my original statement on tolerances there. You'll find that takedown pins have a little bit more wiggle than they normally would. Your trigger pin holes, some of them are 154, some of them are 155, so you'll have to kind of measure and play with them. Everything fits, kinda. So if you are adding or subtracting, like let's say you wanted to put an ambidextrous safety on it, just assume that everything will take a little bit of time to actually work properly. So the Gen 3, and this one is actually, to my knowledge, one of the only complete examples in existence of a Gen 3 lower, but they had their own grip, AR57. They actually had, we'll see if that comes through there, they had their own stock on this as well too. And then these, I've changed the buffer tube out. This is an Andro carbon, but they actually come with a commercial spec buffer tube on them. And the stock fits really, really snug on a commercial spec and a little bit loose. So the stock, I believe these were brought in from China. Once again, we get into that tolerance conversation. It's not quite mil spec, and it's not quite commercial. But it is cool to have it with the logo, and I did like. Let me get this thing. I did like the fact that you do get the little bit of battery storage back there, and for whatever reason, if you wanted to, getting this back together is always fun. There we go. And for whatever reason, you do have some additional pick rail for mounting accessories there. Grip is basically an imported grip that just has their logo on it. And the Gen 3s, they actually use their AR15 branding on the left-hand side. And what they did is they lasered SLC 5.7 into the other side. So with the Gen 3s, they got announced in 16 or 17, I believe. There's maybe 100 of the Gen 3 uppers out there, and this is the only example of a Gen 3 lower that I've ever seen. If we look at the 1 or 2 lower, there is nothing there on the right-hand side. But these are available, and you will see them. You will see a lot of these AR-15 ones pop up on occasion. Same deal, all the same issues as the true AR57 ones. Some of the tolerances, some of the pinholes, and everything else. So something to consider there. But the easiest way to tell if it has either been put together or whether it actually came as a complete pistol or rifle, look at the accessories. So the complete ones, Gen 1, 2, or 3 will have obviously all the logoing there. They'll have the grip. They will have the stock as well. Whereas usually if they've been put together, the grips were very hard to find, and so were the stocks. So that's kind of a good indicator on whether or not it was a build or a factory unit on those. Last thing we'll get to, so the uppers were actually sold as a complete upper. They came with 1 magazine, and they also do come with a heavyweight buffer. If I remember correctly, it's 5.6 or 5.7 ounces, which a 9mm, like an AR9 buffer, will work with it as well too. And then you are able to play with it just a bit. If you want to change your cyclic right there. Last thing I will discuss on these is with the upper. Like I said, the Gen 2 and the Gen 3 are ambi in terms of controls. This is actually a bottom ejecting firearm. So the spent casing actually comes straight down through what we would consider the mag well, and I showed you that a little bit earlier in the video there. Maybe a little hard to see from that angle, but it does make this thing truly ambi. And if you do want to use, if you want to save your brass and you are reloading, what a lot of guys are actually doing is taking a PMag, removing the feed lips and the guts of it, and just letting it fall through the mag well into the magazine there. So if you do want to save your brass, that is a very, very easy way to do it. Outside of that, guys, I really do appreciate your time watching this, and I'll give a shout out again to Prepper's Gun & Coin there for loaning me that Gen 1 upper so I could make this handy dandy instructional video. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below. I've tried to compile all of the knowledge that I could into one video. So if these are something you're interested in, if it's something you're considering for a purchase, I hope this gives you all the info you need to make an informed decision one way or the other. Guys, as always, I appreciate your time. Stay safe, train hard.